Welcome to On Trial, starring Mark Radulich, also starring Sean Comer. Hope you're ready, Hollywood, because you're on trial.
Good evening, folks. This is On Trial. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified Mr. Mark Radulich. And on tonight's docket is, a little late than never, the 1998 adaptation of an adaptation of an adaptation of a show that was on of an adaptation. Excuse me, I got lost in space there. Lost in Space. Starring Gary Oldman, William Hurt, Matt LeBlanc, Mimi Rogers, Heather Graham, Lacey Chabot, Jack Johnson, and Jared Harris. It was distributed by New Line Cinema on a budget of $80 million. And we're talking about that because a few weeks ago we did the Lost in Space Netflix show Season 2 and the Innovation comic, and just things didn't work out for us to get this done, but it was on the schedule, so we are dedicated, damn it. We'll get it done, even if it's a little late, that's fine. So, your prosecuting attorney for this evening's proceedings, ladies and gentlemen, he's Sean, you're not, Mr. Sean Comer. How do you do, sir?
$80 million and 3,500 people made this movie intentionally. This was not an accident. This was absolutely what they intended. Just keep that in mind. Remember the fallen.
So when we first started doing this, I had a couple of movies in mind that I wanted to do, and I think people who listen to the show know that I can, and I don't know if people realize this or not, maybe they do. Sometimes I get a little gimmicky on here. Sometimes. It's a lot of sarcasm there. No, but sometimes there's one of these, like a Catwoman, or one of these really bad movies that sort of, panned universally, that I'll come to the defense for because I had fun watching it, or there's something about it that appealed to my that nature in me that appreciates a good bad movie, a Roger Corman classic, a nudie cutie, a something weird video, a soul cinema, that sort of thing. And so I tend to want to defend the movies that we talk about here more often than prosecute. But occasionally, like I said, Sean and I will flip roles, and I'll prosecute and he defends, and that's fine. Up till now, because Lost in Space really has a dubious distinction on this On Trial podcast. Up till now, I have always found something good I can say about a movie. I can come to its defense. I can pull out what I think people should appreciate about a much marred and maligned feature film. I'm at a fucking loss with this one. Holy cow. There's a lot of times where Sean and I will talk offline and it's like, oh, you got the easy job. Oh, you got the easy job. You got the easy job tonight. This might be the easiest job you ever get on this podcast. And I am showing up to court with no pants, no briefs, just no argument. I gotta discredit your witnesses. That's the only way. I'm gonna try to get your witness to try on a glove. That's the only thing I got at this point.
This week you are Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney.
Yeah, what a pile of trash this is. Oy vey. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Sean, what do you got for notes on this?
Lost in Space came from an idea. Whether this movie came from a good or a bad idea, there was sure an idea there. This arrived in 1998 at a time when Hollywood studios were seemingly snatching up and rebooting and adapting every television series they could possibly find into reboots. And I like to think this period proved something just about infallibly. And that is, if you're going to take something old and you're going to usher it in to the modern era, don't try too hard to make it your own or to make it more modern. You kind of owe it to the source material to stay true to the spirit of it. And I will get more into that. But the idea behind this movie was to take Lost in Space, which itself was an attempt to serialize Robinson Crusoe's Swiss Family Robinson, and give it a 90s update. I hope that gave you the same chills that it did me. Because, oh God, this thing is gloriously 90s. Everything from the gray and black anatomically correct body armor uniforms, including things on kids that, good God, should not be anatomically correct in a mainstream movie, to the dark and gritty action and the elements of horror and what was at one time a world record for the flat-out number of special effects shots in a movie. No, I'm not even remotely exaggerating. Seriously, this reigned atop the Guinness Book for a while. And it flew in the face of everything else that was successful about movies like the Brady Bunch movie and the Beverly Hillbillies and the Addams Family and others, and instead it did everything wrong that set it more in line with the Avengers and the Mod Squad, and that long-forgotten, terrible, raunchy attempt at a Leave It to Beaver movie that I'm still not entirely true wasn't a fever dream. Seriously, we gotta devote a special podcast to that thing if we ever track it down. But the thing is, not all of the ideas were necessarily bad. It's just that, like so many movies before it, they tried to cram too much into just one movie. In fact, the principal cast was signed on for a 3-picture deal because the writers and director envisioned this as a trilogy. One in which, had this movie taken off, the second movie would have seen the Robinson family finally arrive at Alpha Prime, but a version of Alpha Prime already inhabited by humans who had successfully traveled through a wormhole. Which wasn't terrible, and there were good ideas throughout the plot of this movie. Everything from, can the Robinson family come together? Will the various budding romances blossom? Will they survive the attempted sabotage? What's up with all the time travel, yo? But it's just too much that all breaks down right in the middle, and unfortunately, it loses a movie with the right director, Stephen Hopkins, whose pedigree included the fun action romp Predator 2, and the outstanding survival in the wild drama Ghost in the Darkness. The main cast is led by William Hurt, a younger and arguably at the height of his power Matt LeBlanc, and Hollywood legend Gary Oldman, Mimi Rogers, an extremely charming Heather Graham, Lacey Chabert, in fact, it's kind of funny. Lacey Chabert was lucky enough to film this between seasons of Party of Five, whereas LeBlanc was flying back and forth to film both this and Friends simultaneously. You have cameos from most of the original cast, less Bill Mumy and Jonathan Harris, who both openly declared, I will either play my original a version of my original character, or I won't be in the movie at all. Well, you kind of see how that turned out. In part because, funny story, having Bill Mumy play an older Will Robinson was actually scuttled because the directors felt that it would distract too much from the rest of the movie. This makes about as much sense as Ubisoft claiming that there were no female playable characters in Assassin's Creed Unity because Rendering women's is hard, yo. We're talking about a movie with more than 700 special effect shots filmed on more than 12 filmed on more than 12 sound stages, and yet its greatest achievement, releasing on an $80 million budget to make $136.2 million, to basically make a movie that's better known for sweeping up a whole lot of Razzie nominations. One last note. Jared Harris, the actor who ultimately did play older time-traveled Will Robinson thing, he ultimately had to be dubbed because he lacked the vocal range for the part. So, fun little tidbit there. But it's gone down as history as a movie that Latter-day fans have said, it's not as bad as everybody made it out to be. And others look at it and go, no, it's pretty much as bad as it's made out to be in every way that it was made out to be.
All right. With that said, the plot goes something like this, and some of this I'm going to have to read, and some of it I'll just, do a summation. But it's 2058, and the Earth has gone to plaid. It's uninhabitable due to pollution and ozone depletion. As we mentioned, this was made in the 90s. So, the United Global Space Force sends Professor John Robinson, who's played by William Hurt, wife Maureen, who is Mimi Rogers, Judy's daughters Judy and Penny, who are Heather Graham and Lacey Chabert, and young prodigy son Will, on the spaceship Jupiter 2 to complete construction of a hypergate over the planet Alpha Prime, which will allow the population of Earth to be instantly transported and populate the new planet. All right? Nobody wants to go. Dad wants to go. Mom's, I guess, okay with it. The kids are like, nah, we'd rather stay on the polluted world. So this is a family that is sort of described, not necessarily in crisis, but this is a family who's, we're back to what we talked about with the Santa Claus. Dad works too much, and the kids are stressed out, and Mom is stressed out, and this family has seen better days. Anywho, they are accompanied by pilot Major Don West, paid by Matt LeBlanc, as we said before, of Friends fame, and Gary Oldman, who's playing Dr. Zachary Smith, who was a spy for a group that stands against this whole movement to Alpha Prime, called Sedition, I think it is. Anyway, he sabotages the ship, and the family, as the family enters cryosleep. There's a robot on the ship. It activates and begins to destroy the navigation and guidance systems en route to destroying the family. However, Smith awakens the Robinsons and West, who manage to subdue the robot. But the ship is falling uncontrollably into the sun. Forced to use the experimental hyperdrive with an unplotted course, the ship is transported through hyperspace to a remote planet in an uncharted part of the universe. All right, so a lot of the movie is kind of getting to this particular point. The next part of the movie is trying to figure out where they are. There's more tension with the family. There's a lot of, obviously, tension with the doctor. There's what's supposed to be sexual tension between Judy and Don West, because you gotta have a love story, I guess. There's some conflict between Dad and Will. The daughter, Lacey Chabert, is like the punk rock of the group. She's just kind of being a jerk. She is stereotype number one. Yeah. Anyway, they come across, passing through a strange distortion in space, the crew finds two abandoned ships in orbit. The Earth ship Proteus and another ship clearly not of human origin. They board the Proteus, with Will controlling the now modified robot. They find navigational data to reach Alpha Prime, and a camouflaging creature Penny calls Blarp, along with evidence suggesting the ship is from the future. They are attacked by spider-like creatures. One scratches Smith, and the robot's body is irreparably damaged, but Will saves its computerized intelligence. They destroy the ship to get rid of the spiders, but in doing so, it causes the ship to crash land on a nearby planet, where another distortion appears. Young Will, theorizes that they are distortions in time, as his experiment predicted, which was set up in the beginning of the film. But John ignores his input because he's mean. He's mean dad. Get it? Exploring the time bubble, he and Wes encounter a future version of Will, who's missing everything but a flannel shirt tied around his waist, by the way, because it's the 90s, and a robot he built with a saved intelligence, which is supposed to be this is supposed to be an analog or a throwback to the robot from the original 60s show. The older Will explains that the surviving spiders killed his family, so he constructed a time machine, and this particular version of Will return to Earth to prevent the Jupiter 2 from launching, which inevitably caused his family to be killed and such. Young Will and Smith investigate the time bubble on their own. Smith tricks Will into handing over his weapon, but is foiled by a future version of himself transformed by his spider injury into the Emperor. Initially, just a kind of a cross between Doctor Doom from the Josh Trank Fantastic Four and the Emperor, and it gets better once he finally takes his cloak off. But we'll get there in a second. His spider, so was transformed by his spider injury into a spider-like creature who has been protecting Will since the rest of his family was killed. The present Will and Wes return to the Jupiter 2 with an injured Smith and the robot in tow, while the future Smith reveals his true plan. He killed the Robinsons. It was me, Austin. It was me the whole time. But kept Will alive to build the time machine, so Smith could return to Earth and populate it with a race of spiders, like you do. John, remembering the spiders eat their wounded, rips open Smith's egg sac with a trophy Will turned into a weapon. This was set up earlier in the movie. See? This is good writing, yeah? Smith's spider army devours him, and he's thrown into the time portal, ripping him apart. The planet's increasing instability forces the Jupiter 2 to take off, but they are unable to reach escape velocity and are destroyed by the planet's debris. Realizing his father never actually abandoned them and that he really does love him, sure, Will sets the time machine to send John back to his family, but there's only enough power for one person. Saying goodbye to his family, the future Will is killed by the falling debris, and John reunites with his living family. Realizing they don't have enough power to escape the planet's gravitational pull, John says, hey, drive through the core of the planet, you see, and the gravity will slingshot them back into space. They are successful, but the planet turns into a black hole, and they activate the hyperdrive to escape using the Proteus' navigational data to set a potential course for Alpha Prime. The ship blasts off into space, and the best part of the movie happens: the end credit half techno music, which ends with Penny Robinson saying, "This trip sucks," which is my favorite part of the whole movie. All right, Sean.
Allow me to explain. I'm sorry. Were you? You saw you about to say something else.
I was going to cue you by saying, as a girl in a gangbang once said, "Let's get this shit over with."
Could say so much, and I'm not going to. You're welcome, Internet. Anyway, allow me to explain to you, in brief, why I love the first Addams Family movie. Everything, from the script to the set to the cast, from Radulich to Angelica Houston to Christopher Lloyd, Christina Ricci, embodies an absolute love letter to everything about the series. It is a resuscitation of the very heart and soul of everything that made them creepy and kooky, mysterious and ooky. Allow me to explain to you what I loved about the Brady Bunch. Everything, from the way it's shot, to the set, to the cast from Gary Cole and Shelley Long downward, embodies an absolute love letter to everything that made people fall in love with the original series, even when lightly taking the piss out of it and deconstructing it in a modern setting. Allow me to explain to you in brief what I loved about the Beverly Hillbillies. Almost every single moment of this movie, despite being in a modern setting and including an amazing cast that includes Diedrich Bader and the late criminally underrated Jim Varney, down to Lily Tomlin as Miss Hathaway, is an absolute love letter to everything that caused people to fall in love with the original series in the first place. Dukes of Hazzard, absolute love letter to all the charm of the original series. From arguably perfect casting of Willie Nelson, Johnny Knoxville, Seann William Scott, and Jessica Simpson downward, and including an amazing villain role by the great James Roday, it embodies an amazing 2-hour retelling of the original series. Allow me to tell you exactly where Lost in Space begins to fall apart. Somebody wrote this movie after remembering all three seasons of the original series and actually saw its turn toward lovable camp that made it so beloved as a downturn. They decided that it needed to be gritty, it needed to be action-oriented, it needed to be a big old barrel of 90s splooge. Hence, it became unrecognizable as anything Lost in Space to anybody who grew up loving the original series. Now, there are exceptions to this. Netflix actually made a more serious retelling work because the Netflix series is much more focused. Also, they have an episodic format in which they can take multiple strings and let them play out over a longer timeline. This one, much like Spider-Man 3, tries to cram roughly 3 movies worth of plot into 88 minutes. Or, if you're watching the expanded version of it, about 122 minutes. Yes, I am not kidding. I couldn't make this up if I tried. There is a 122-minute, 2-hour cut. In fact, you know what? I stand corrected. I was wrong. That was actually looking at the score. Did I mention I've been sick? I looked at the wrong part of my notes. Oh. You know what, guys? Amazingly, even when I'm seriously fucking sick right now, I somehow actually still got it right. It was not an 88-minute movie. They released a 130-minute Lost in Space movie.
I'd have killed myself by the time it was over.
130 fucking minute adaptation of a campy serial 60s TV show. Zombie Jeebus. And the amazing thing is, if they had limited themselves to maybe just 1 or 2 plots, like if they had limited themselves to the stereotypical trappings of the family, the son who feels ignored by his dad, the angsty stock plug and play teenage daughter, the charming budding romance between the extremely likable, I might add, Matt LeBlanc and Heather Graham, and maybe settled on that and the sabotage arc as just A and B stories, and not tried to confuse things with all the shootouts and the time travel nonsense, you would have had a fairly tight movie, a story that you could have told in probably roughly about 90 minutes or so, maybe a little bit more, and you would have had enough material left over to make that second or third movie, and it might have been justifiable. Because you got to remember, this movie technically made its budget back in the state that it released it. Imagine if it had been a little bit more tightly written. Imagine if it had been just a bit more focused. And that's the biggest problem. The movie sets up the characters as likable. You see the makings of something that you can actually get into. In a way, for me, it was like sitting down and watching Disney's live-action Aladdin for the very first time. I was actually really into everything that I was seeing, right up until swole-up Papa Smurf popped out of the lamp. In this one, you actually kind of feel a sense of promise, right up until they actually become lost in space. And that's when you start watching everything. And, you know, there were people who criticized the Mission Impossible movie as being too much of a departure from the original series. Those were absolutely aghast that Mr. Phelps was made the villain. But that, at least in places, still felt like a Mission Impossible movie. It was still nodding and paying homage to the original. This feels like Lost in Space in name only. It doesn't even feel like a take on Swiss Family Robinson anymore. It's just kind of a random space shoot-'em-up. And that's truly sad, because this could have been one of the good TV adaptations to the big screen. And instead, we got a bloated clusterfuck that I should add originally coined the term United Global Space Force. Dear God, Toupee Fiasco might have very well gotten this from watching Lost in Space. Nani the fuck. Anyway, I hand it over to you.
Okay, well, every dog has its day, and every film deserves at least an effort to defend it. So here's what's good about this movie. Structurally, look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you should watch this movie. Let me first say this. When we were talking about doing this for On Trial, and there's a group chat of all of us here on the network for scheduling purposes, which often goes astray, but that's what it was made for.
There's a reason I peep in only briefly.
Yeah. The mute button works very well.
It does. It really does.
But what was said by a number of people, and you got to remember, I'm probably, of the people I podcast with, I'm probably the oldest person. Everybody else is either around my age within a year or two, or about 7 years younger, and then a few even younger than that. So
How old are you coming in at?
I'll be 44 in June.
44 in June. Okay. Yeah, whereas I'm 37, so I'm probably at least in the top 5.
Yeah, so I would say most of the people in the Radulich and Broadcasting network of podcasters is somewhere into the 30 to 40 range. The mid-30s group, the group that are around the age of my wife, the 7 to 10 year group was talking about this movie, and a lot of them said, I liked it when I was a kid. And something that I've become painfully aware of over time
I can see Alexa saying that.
She wasn't the only one. Pat said it, Rob said it, Winfrey, that is, of Damn You Hollywood in the 401 Ground and Pound radio show on 401mania.com. A lot of them said, when they watched this as a kid in 1998, I was in college. I was just graduating college. But a lot of them were in high school or younger. And look, not everybody's a film critic. Not everybody. I've been kind of bitching and whining about this lately, but my dad has heard a bunch of these podcasts, and he was like, I don't understand why you're so critical of movies. If I'm entertained, it's good. If I'm not, it's bad. If it doesn't have an internal sense of logic, it's bad. I don't know what you're yelling about half the time.
I could, if I may interject, I could kind of explain that, and it's from a phrase that, and again, I'm in Michael Jordan flu game mode right now. I'm just off in my own little world. So if I get this citation wrong, like referring to Robinson Crusoe as the author of Swiss Family Robinson, derp, forgive me. But I believe it was on an episode of Diamanda Hagen's Twatty New Who reviews, in which she prefaced an opinion of something by saying, "Remember, nobody complains like a fan." No, but there's something to that. There's something to that. There's the point where you're bitching just because you like to hear yourself talk and because, you enjoy kind of being a masturbatory little edgelord. And then there's the point where you want to rail on something because you know that it was capable of being so much more.
Sure.
And you were so dissatisfied with what you got. Let's go back in time. The Paranormal Activity podcasts. Guys, I got news for you. I didn't muster the energy to go full Super Saiyan Sean about Paranormal Activity 3 because I went into that movie expecting it to be bad. That was because I loved the first two movies, and I was grossly disappointed that I felt like I didn't get what was advertised. You see something like this, and part of you goes, okay, I could kind of get behind this. I'm rooting for this. I want this to do well. And then you go see what they thought was a good idea. Or the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot is another great example. I personally tricked myself into thinking, you know what, my mind is changing. Maybe this won't be quite as bad as I thought. Jackie Earle Haley actually looks like a pretty good Freddy Krueger. Maybe this will turn the franchise around. Oh God, I came away from that movie pissed. Because I wanted another original Nightmare on Elm Street. I wanted another Dream Warriors. I wanted another new Nightmare. And instead, I got that. So anyway, that's my brief explanation.
So the point that I'm getting to, and it's my first line of defense of this movie, is it's one of those, and I said at the onset of this podcast, it doesn't appeal to me in any way, and I'm really trying to compartmentalize between the objective quality that's piss poor about this movie and the subjective, just things I don't like about it. But that being said, I think if you are a young kid or you're just out for a good time, does the movie move quickly and keep you entertained? Yeah, pretty much. I think there's an objective the objective quality where the pace can keep a casual viewer interested. If you like space adventure, they get to the mall quickly. They're in space within the first 30 minutes. The sabotage of the ship and the family in peril that sets this whole thing off in motion all happens in the first 30 minutes of the movie. Structurally, that's sound. A lot of the family dynamic gets paid. There are things set up in that first 30 minutes that get paid off later on. And, that sounds like that might sound like a very pick and union thing to talk about, but that's proper movie structure. You introduce, in your first act, you introduce the problems that the movie and the characters in there, your main characters, are going to deal with as the movie progresses. You spend your second act throwing all kinds of barrels and hurdles at them for them to overcome. This is what's known as an arc. And then you have your conclusion, your resolution. This is what they taught me in screenwriting class. This is what I approach a lot of my movie review podcasts with, kind of keeping that in mind, if nothing else is there. And so that's where this movie, I think, is successful. A lot of what they set up in the first act is resolved in the third act. There are, little things like the trophy and the relationship between the father and Will, which is a big girder that's hoisting this movie up. In terms of action, you have the initial sabotaging of the ship, which looks fun. You have the robot yelling, "Destroy, destroy," which is laughable. But I could see where people, especially if you went to go see this because you were a fan of the show, would think that's fun and are into it. You have, the middle section of the movie deals with the spiders, the resolution. You've got the fight between Dr. Smith, who becomes the giant spider alien creature. You've got the planet blowing up. It's very space action movie, and people like that. And if you don't think about it, if you're not like highly critical of movies, if you're not trying to do critical analysis and you're just out for a good time, it all kind of works. I don't know if it works as Lost in Space, but it works as generic space action family movie. The cast, I don't know what possessed them to think William Hurt was going to be a good leading man for this, but he's there. He's a capable actor. Mimi Rogers, and the little bit that they give her to do, is there, and she's a capable actress. These are all good-looking people. It's not like anybody on the screen is actively ugh, And this is very much, if you're a producer and you've got a checklist in front of you, you're like, good-looking actors, sound story structure, some fun action set pieces. It clicks those boxes. It absolutely does. Well, Matt LeBlanc did not exactly set the world on fire after his Friends run. I think most people would agree he's a good-looking dude, and maybe he didn't choose the best pictures. But I think there was a window there where people were at least willing to give him a chance. Both the audience and Hollywood itself were willing to give him a chance as like a leading man action role. Not dumb TV sitcom actor. Heather Graham is pretty. Lacey Chabert is cute in the movie. She then the little that they give her to do as sort of the surly, rebellious little kid is fun. The only one who, unfortunately, and I can't really defend the kid. I mean, he's trying. Jack Johnson as Will Robinson. There's an earnestness there. I mean, I think who directed this? Stephen Hopkins. I figured, it's a little kid. It's better than Jake Lloyd. It is what it is. I think he's trying his level best, and I think if you're a kid, and again, you're not hypercritical of someone's acting ability, you probably can find yourself projecting onto him. And he does cool stuff in this movie. He gets to do the thing with the robot, where he's in the VR thing, where he's controlling the robot. He has a major part to play in sort of the time travel elements of it, and so again, if you're a little kid, if you're a little boy, you can put yourself in that role. That's not the worst thing I've ever seen in a movie. In terms of, Sean, one of Sean's prosecutorial notes was, this doesn't really work as Lost in Space. In the sense that for a 2-hour movie, they're sabotaged, they have to jump before they're burnt to a crisp, and they don't know where they are, and then they're having to resolve that issue by finding maps from another ship, and then they're having to resolve that issue, and then they finally are able to get out of danger and get away from the planet as it's falling apart around them, and they jump away, and you don't know where they're headed to next. Theoretically, they're headed to Alpha Prime, but so were the folks in the Lost in Space television show. Shit happens. It's space. I think had this worked, had this actually done well, and let's not get it twisted, it didn't. It made 136 on 80 million, and if you do your movie math, 136 is less than 160. So this thing lost money, and we will never speak of the shortcut again, as far as New Line Cinema goes. But that said, I think had this captured the public's attention, had it captured their imagination, I think there was some fun to be had in a sequel. with them, thinking they jumped to Alpha Prime, but they didn't, or they get there and there, there's an issue of some sort they have to resolve. There was potential with this movie, but if for whatever the reasons are, various people, it didn't work well enough to garner the audience big enough to take it any further. But I think there was some seeds of a good idea here. And I say this a lot. I think there were some good ideas that were kind of executed poorly. And I think there were some ambitious plans with this movie that maybe needed another pass through editing before they shot the first frame of this movie. But overall, if I'm being fair, it's not a total loss. If you're the kind of person who's looking to be entertained for 2 hours, there are entertaining enough elements and good enough acting that this is just passable to be entertaining. You got anything else? Any further prosecutorial notes?
A little bit. One of the biggest problems with Lost in Space is that it's hard to tell really who it caters effectively to. As a futuristic space shoot-'em-up goes, it's bland, frantic, unfocused, fairly unmemorable. Nothing other than Gary Oldman's outstanding performance really stands out terribly. It's frankly not going to appeal at all to fans of the original series because they're going to take one look at this and find it completely unrecognizable, except for the fact that the characters are there in name only. They are, in fact, lost in space, but it isn't going to touch nary a single nerve of what enabled those 3 seasons to burrow such a hole in their hearts. And again, it's something that it's why it works so much better on Netflix as a revived series. You can play these things out. It is an episodic format. It is serialized.
Let me throw something in there, just because again I've done a review 2 seasons of this. That's also pure science fiction. This is more of an action movie set in space.
That too. That's also an excellent point. It feels more connected to the tissue of the original series. The Netflix series feels like it came from someone who adored Lost in Space as a kid. This one, it's in a way the Resident Evil 6 of movies. It's trying to be too much all at once, and it's not particularly good at being any of it. And that's too bad.
Yes. The Poochie effect.
And oh, did it die on the way back to its home planet. She died horribly. Which is too bad. I wouldn't mind seeing someone else take a proper stab at it, maybe while being able to a little more delicately blend the original sense of camp with what they were trying to do in terms of giving it a little more gravitas. But overall, it's such a waste of what are some terribly good performances, some halfway decent ideas, and my God, a bloated running time. I mean, 130 minutes. You're talking about more than 4 episodes. In fact, let's see here. If we're supposing that a full episode is, remind me, was Lost in Space a half hour serial, or was it an hour?
The original?
Yeah.
Keep talking and I'll let you know.
Okay. If we're assuming that it was a half hour series, you're talking, my God, let's see here, 30, 60, 90, 120. But let's assume we're talking about 25 minutes of actual TV with the commercials.
It was an hour show. They're saying, according to the Wikipedia page, it ran 51 minutes.
Oh, really? I thought it was a half hour.
That would have been my guess for the 60s, but apparently not. I guess Star Trek ran an hour too, didn't it?
It did. That's true. It did. Yeah, because you see, I was about to say if it was a half an hour or about 25 minutes with commercials, you're talking about the running time of roughly 5 episodes for your movie to tell a single focused arc. But instead, we're still talking about a running time equivalent to more than 2 full episodes that don't feel remotely as satisfying, nearly as contained, or as easy to follow or invest in at all, because there's just too much going on. So, my advice, less is more. If you want to adapt a TV show, less is more. Just 90 minutes. That's your sweet spot. If just we're talking about three act structure, okay. You're talking about 3 half-hour episodes. That's about how it should work. Just keep it down to that, and don't feel like you need to absolutely set everything up in your first movie. Give yourself somewhere to go if you want to make those next 2 movies. Because frankly, for everything that they set up, what was going to feel terribly new about the next 2? What was going to be the new ground they were going to break? You know? But that's about it. It's a tale of what could have been.
Yeah. Like I said at the top of the show, I mean, I meant every word I said of my defense. You kind of needled me at the start of the year about, hey, we should just, learn to like things. And Alexis, I think, threw up a picture. I think it was Alexis, might have been Ronnie, one of them, threw up a picture of 2 people having a conversation about Star Wars. It was like, I didn't like The Last Jedi. I liked it. They're like, well, I'm glad it brought joy to your life, and someone yelling in the background, that's not how this works. And I've kind of taken both of them.
Wait. So what point was she trying to make?
There was a cartoon. There was a comic strip that she put up, and it depicts 2 Star Wars fans having a discussion about one of the movies. We're only talking 4 panels here, but one of them says he likes it, one of them says he doesn't, and the other one, and then there's like a panel, and you can see in the background there's a guy getting amped up because he's about to see a fight between these 2 Star Wars fans, and one of them says, it's like, I'm sorry you didn't like it, and the other one says, well, I'm glad it brought joy to your life. And the guy yells out, that's not how this works. But the reason I brought it up was just keeping in mind that, and this also came up in the Sonic discussion that Jesse and I had about, we're reviewing a comic that was clearly meant for children. And I had to, and sort of I gave an analysis of, of the story structure and what I thought could have been fleshed out more and built upon, and where I thought it lacked a little bit. And I took a beat and I said, but remember, this wasn't written for a 40-year-old. It was written for a child. It's okay.
It's Sonic. It's Sonic the Hedgehog.
No, I mean, the point is, not everything is written to be, the high art masterpiece, or any number of variations of this sentence work here. But ultimately, all I'm saying is I try to keep in mind that whether or not it made money, this did work for some people at a certain time in their life. Those people grew up, and some of them now say this movie is trash, and I would agree with them. But, as I said before, there might have been 8, 9, 10-year-old boys in 1998 who watched this and thought it was just the best thing ever and don't understand why everyone... My daughter... I'm going to conclude on this. I took my daughter to go see the Elizabeth Banks Charlie's Angels movies. And for those of you who listen to Damn You Hollywood, when we talked about... what was it? It was Dr. Sleep. It was Terminator, I think, when we talked about this. But I took her to go see have heard some of this before. Took her to go see the Elizabeth Banks Charlie's Angels movie, and she loved it. Just thought it was the best thing ever. She was doing like front kicks and roundhouse kicks as she walked out of the theater. And she was like, I want to be a lady spy. You know? This is November, by the way. So she's 8 going on 9 in a month or two. And she's like, I don't understand why everyone didn't go see this. This was amazing. And of course it lost like historical amounts of money, and Elizabeth Banks fought with people on Twitter. It worked for her. It worked for it worked for an 8-year-old girl who wants to see herself, even as an adult, represented on screen in hero roles.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. And really, that is what a lot of this comes down to, is box office draw is not the only metric for success. A movie can achieve things in myriad ways, and sometimes it fails in one while succeeding at another. It might absolutely revolutionize special effects while utterly failing on a narrative level or containing some terribly clunky performances. There are a lot of 80s fantasy movies you could say this about, to be perfectly honest. And then there's just the sheer enjoyment factor, which is where I come to Birds of Prey. And one of the interesting things that I'm kind of keen to find out when Carrie and I go to see it this week is, is the movie, are we talking about a bad movie that is justifiably underperforming at the box office because it's bad? Or are we talking about a good movie that's unfortunately been dealt a bad hand by a combination of WB's signature failed marketing and men across the internet raising their fists in rage and demanding to know why Black Canary no make my pee-pee dance?
I think that is just like a lot of the angry neckbeards out there would have just settled for a white Black Canary and not a black Canary. But you never know what's going to set somebody off.
But again, it's representation.
Yep.
It's a matter of representation. Just what is it that gets some of these people so hung up on a character, on a set of powers, of an identity being strictly tied to a white person?
I don't think it's that. I think it's, and this relates to Lost in Space, maybe this will be the final word on it. You watch a thing, you read a thing, comic books, not so much because they're not really a visual medium, but you watch a TV show or an old movie, or you read a comic book, and you fall in love with it, and you're like, gosh, I wish I could see this on the big screen. And then somebody says, well, we're going to do that. I think for a lot of people, it's a very linear thinking process. What I saw on the page or what I saw on my TV screen or in this old movie, I want to see depicted on screen with a big budget. They want it to be like a direct translation. So Harley Quinn, Birds of Prey, just as an example. Birds of Prey is a pretty rich tradition. There was the Gail Simone run on the thing. Mm-hmm. It's gone through many different iterations. There are huge fans of the comic book and those characters that have their own legacies. So if you say to somebody who's been reading the comic books, in all fairness to them, for years, and say, we're going to put Black Canary in a movie, they want the Black Canary that they've been reading for years to be depicted on screen as best they can.
See, but that's just the thing, is this movie was made, it's, number one, it's arguably Margot Robbie's biggest passion project of the last several years. Mm-hmm. As someone who absolutely adores these characters, and unless I'm mistaken, it was made with considerable input from no less than Gail Simone herself.
Yeah. Look, I'm not saying they handled it wrong. Like, I have my criticisms of the movie, but it's craft-based. It isn't production-based. Mm-hmm. Though I said on the review, I really think they rushed this to the screen. But that's all. People can hear that podcast. That's already up in the archives on WTM.net. Mm-hmm. I'm saying, if we're talking about why do people, whether it's Lost in Space or Birds of Prey or Charlie's Angels, why do people just get so mad about this stuff? I think for a lot of people, like I said, it's they want a direct translation. Here's just as another example. They went out of their way, I think, to find somebody who looked like the classic representation, the classically drawn Wonder Woman. They went with Gal Gadot,
which ended up being better than I expected. I'll eat my words on that one.
Yeah, I didn't think Gal Gadot could pull it off, but she was amazing. And again, people are like, oh, women in hero movies. Guys will go, guys will go when they feel like the character is being done justice. So I think, male readers of comics like Wonder Woman and saw Gal Gadot. They saw the costume. They saw, what looked, and the movie did well. I think everybody got treated with respect, the fans and the IP, and it works. And so now there's a sequel, and hopefully it does well as well. But they didn't go with like.
But if you're talking about visually, when it comes to Black Canary, you're talking about the same name, same set of powers. What's the biggest difference? That is indeed what I come back to.
Yeah, don't get me. Look, this is like having an argument with my dad where I'm pushed into defending something I don't actually believe. I don't care that they got the actors who they got to play Black Canary. I'm long since over stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But the conversation became sort of dovetailing into why it started with how movies can be entertaining for different groups of people. I brought up the Charlie's Angels thing. I said Lost in Space, to its credit and its demise, works for a very small group of people. Young, probably boys, ages 8 to 13. And it doesn't work for many other people. It couldn't have. Nobody else saw the damn thing. And it has not exactly had, it hasn't even gotten the distinction of being like a cult classic or people going back to going, Phantom Menace, not as bad as I remember. Nobody says that about this movie. Everyone's just like, just fucking leave it alone. So that's really it. That's all I have to say about this whole subject. I think they tried something with Lost in Space with this movie. I think there was probably a lot of voices in the room going, we want something that draws from the classic television show. And then there's another voice in the room going, yeah, but it's 1996, 97, however long this took to be in production. Let's modernize it. Let's give it that Hollywood sparkle. And it's, we always reference the Poochie thing because boy is that an example of how sometimes you can overcook a thing. It's like, well, these things test really well right now, and so we'll kind of assign a character or an IP all of those traits, and then you get this mess that appeals to a very small portion of people. Mm-hmm. So that's it. That's all I got here. Next go around for On Trial will be, let's see, when are we doing this again? Thursday, March 19th, in honor of St. Patrick's Day, will have been the previous Tuesday, the 17th. We're doing the Boondock Saints. And once again, Sean will be prosecuting and I will be defending. I have actually never seen it. So this will be a rare treat for me. In the meantime, you can check out the original comic, the first 5 issues that we reviewed of Lost in Space on source material. That went up February 3rd. Dave Wright and I reviewed Lost in Space Season 2. We do have a lot of Birds of Prey up as stuff as well. We did the comic compilation of various issues featuring those characters. We did the Birds of Prey review. That was myself, Alexis Hana, Rob Winfrey, and David Wright. We did a review of Sepultura's Quadra. Pat and I put up another chapter of boxing history. We talked about Floyd Patterson and Sonny Liston. And then Alexis Hana and I did the Birds of Prey. Speaking of, well, swing and a miss. The Birds of Prey television show from 2002 or 3, whatever year that was. Myself and Robert Winfrey covered both the 1 minute of the Ryan Garcia-Francisco Fonseca fight that ended in Fonseca losing math. And then we switched over to the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, such as it was, Isaac Cruz versus Thomas Matisse, in which Cruz pulled off the upset. And then myself and John Ward coverage for Caleb Plant versus Vincent Feigenbutts. Feigenbutts, ladies and gentlemen. Fantastic. Sonic Genesis went up today on source material. Tomorrow, the Podsman and I are going to talk NXT TakeOver Portland. We'll have a review of Hollywood Undead, New Empire, Volume 1 on Metal Hammer of Doom. And then we'll have a review of the new, and just tearing up the airways, burning up all the screens, making all the money, Sonic the Hedgehog, the movie, on Damn You Hollywood this Thursday. We've got a Wilder Fury 2 preview on Friday, and then the fight of the century itself, Wilder Fury 2 this Saturday. I'm going to find someone to cover it with me, even if I have to chase my wife around the living room with a microphone. Someone's going to call this fight with me. God damn it. All right, Sean, do your thing and let's get on out of here.
You know, one of these days we'll have to do a thing where I actually watch a boxing card with you and you just kind of talk me through it.
Sure.
Like the utter nooblet that I currently am, given how long I've kind of been sort of out of the loop.
You know, if you want that, I should make you watch a bare-knuckle boxing card. Because that'll just be me laughing and howling loudly as guys knock each other out within a minute of the fight.
I need you to give me a couple of days to decide whether that actually sounds like a good idea or if it's just how sick I am.
Terrific.
I hope the audio for the show has come out well, because I got to say, this has been the first show in which I've been using my recently acquired Audio Technica mic.
Yeah, there were no sound issues tonight that I could see.
Good. As far as where you can catch me everywhere else, generally speaking, I highly recommend following me on Twitter at Comer Codex, because that is where I put up the updates when I am going to be streaming on Twitch, which nowadays is from 7 a.m. Central Time until about 10 or 11 a.m. I just kind of stream over breakfast and coffee while I'm just kind of sorting my day out. I am now the captain of an unranked open division Overwatch team. And so tomorrow I'm going to be running about a 2 or 3 hour stream in which I'm going to be playing nothing but Winston solo queuing in comp, because my coach wants to see some VODs to get a feel for where I am as our team's main tank. This may not be pretty. So if you want to watch me come and kind of do my very level bestest to keep composure in the most chaotic of circumstances, find me tomorrow morning at twitch.tv/ComerCodex. If you can't remember that, again, just follow me on Twitter, and the link is right there in my bio.
All right, folks, this has been another edition of On Trial For Sean Comer, this has been your mandated reporter, Mr. Mark Radulich. Be well, be safe, and behave.